From Cornish College of the Arts to Seattle University, good evening and thank you for being here. My name is Hana Kim. I'm a news anchor at Fox 13 Seattle, and this is your debate between the candidates who want to be your next Seattle mayor. I'm joined by Emily Parkhurst. She's the CEO of Formidable Media, and this program is brought to you by Seattle City Club in partnership with Formidable Media. And we'd like to thank our premier media partners who are bringing this debate to you tonight. And of course, thank you to Seattle University for hosting us at the Raisbeck Auditorium, our production partner, WV Livestream, and other event sponsors. We will be asking a range of questions tonight based on the most pressing issues facing our city. Some of them have been submitted by the audience. Some will be asked by community leaders who are present here tonight. The rules are simple. Each candidate will have 90 seconds for an opening statement. They will have 60 seconds to answer initial questions. We will lead a moderated discussion with 30 seconds for follow-up questions or rebuttals. And each candidate will end with a 90-second closing statement. We have asked our live audience to remain respectfully silent from here on out. No cheers or boos except now, as we thank our candidates, Katie Wilson and Bruce Harrell, for being here today. We tossed a coin backstage to determine who would make the first opening statement. Katie Wilson got that, and she chose to go first for this opening statement. So thank you so much. You have 90 seconds. Ms. Wilson.
Thank you, and it is wonderful to be here with all of you tonight. So my name is Katie Wilson, and I'm running for Seattle Mayor. I moved to Seattle over 20 years ago with my husband, and now we're raising our daughter here. Over that time, I've watched our city transform and grow, and much of that change has been good, but Seattle has also become a city that is so hard to afford. I want it to be a place where my daughter can grow up and build a life here if she wants to, and right now that vision feels very out of reach. I've spent the last 14 years as a community organizer and a coalition builder, winning transformative victories that benefit working families across our region every single day. Better public transit and more affordable fares, higher minimum wages, stronger renter protections, and progressive revenue so that we can fund the vital public goods and services that we all depend on. I'm running because we need a mayor's office that is responsive and effective, and right now we are failing. We cannot have another 4 years when the rates of unsheltered homelessness go up and up and up. I cannot keep watching families like mine move out of the city because they cannot afford to live here. Seattle is a great city, and I've spent the last 8 months talking with voters, community leaders around our city, and although we have problems, it also gives me so much hope because I know that together we can build a city that we can all believe in. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. I entered public service simply to solve problems because people like me have historically been boxed out of power. We've been left out. I was born of very modest means. My mother was in a concentration camp during World War II. My father escaped the segregated South to come here to Seattle just to have a better life. I went to Seattle public schools here. I attended the University of Washington on a football scholarship. And those life experiences have allowed me to say to you that I believe we've laid the path for Seattle to be one of the most livable cities in this country. Now, we will invest over $1 billion in affordable housing. I know how hard it is to live in Seattle. This was my parents' story. We will build one of the most effective public safety ecosystems, starting with good police. That's why I enacted the racial profiling law, and I enacted the race and social justice legislation with our unarmed response in our care department because we need that kind of skill set to protect everyone, and a first-class fire department. We are now building a system where every child that graduates from Seattle Public Schools can go to college for free to pursue his or her dreams, whether it's high-tech or biotech or we're working with our hands or in arts and culture. The fact of the matter is we'll have 4,500 slots for childcare and pre-K as well. But I need 4 more years to right the ship, and we've laid the foundation for it. Thank you very much.
Ms. Wilson, this question is for you. Many in the public may not know a lot about your background. It looks like you studied at Oxford University before moving to Seattle in 2004. Two-part question here. Did you graduate that university? And what jobs did you hold in your early years before you started the Transit Riders Union?
Great question. I did not graduate. I left about 6 weeks before I would have graduated, much to the surprise and consternation of my parents. And you can actually read all about it in The Stranger, which just published an in-depth profile of me that goes into some of that history. So I was kind of a life decision for me to embark on a different path. I come from an academic household. My parents are biologists. And soon after I left college, where I studied physics and philosophy, I moved to Seattle. And in the first years that I lived here, worked all kinds of jobs to get by. My first job was in an environmental analysis laboratory. I worked in a boatyard down on Lake Union for a summer, which was probably my favorite job. It was great fun. I worked a bunch of kind of construction apartment renovation jobs. I was a legal assistant for a while. I managed an apartment building, did a bunch of things, and met a lot of people and really learned a lot about the experience of working low-wage jobs in Seattle over those years.
Ms. Wilson, one follow-up question there. During your time as president of the Transit Riders Union, your organization consistently reported operating losses upwards of about 20% on $200,000 in revenue. Why should the city trust you to balance a budget of billions? You have about 60 seconds.
Okay, so I think you're talking about the last few years, which is something that Mayor Harrell's brought up in a few debates. I mean, I think anyone who's run a nonprofit knows that it's pretty normal for expenses and revenues to not exactly match up in a year. So the Transit Riders Union has never been in debt, never failed to pay an employee, never failed to pay a bill. And I think we've just done just fine at managing our budget and also at punching above our weight in terms of the things that we're able to achieve on a very modest budget. And I also just want to point out that the size of the Transit Riders Union's budget does not really reflect the scale of the work that we do, right? This is an organization that is funded by small dollar dues of working and poor people, transit riders, renters, low-wage workers who pool their money because they believe in our mission and the work that we do. So we are scrappy by design, and because we are independent, because we're funded largely by our members, that means that we're able to turn on a dime and take advantage of opportunities and win things that many larger organizations are unable to win.
Thank you. Mr. Harrell, your previous deputy mayor accused you of running an office where toxic sexism was allowed. How do you respond to those accusations, and how would you describe the culture of your office? You have 60 seconds.
First of all, that deputy mayor is my niece. That's my brother's daughter, who my brother died of cancer a few years ago. Her feedback means a lot to me. I played a big role in her life raising her. So if that was her perception and that's how she felt, I have to receive that and have to get better. The fact is that I have the lowest turnover rate in a mayor's office in 30 years. The fact is I have more diversity on my team. Nearly half are women and people of color. The fact is I was president of the city council and I got what's called SHRM certified because I want to be really good. SHRM is a human resource professional certification, really good in human resource issues. If you talk to anyone on my cabinet, anyone on my team, they absolutely love working for me. They have great senses of humor. This is tough work we're doing. We lean on each other. And so we listen to feedback. When you have 14,000 employees, you have a big team. You try to do things right, but I think people love working for me.
I'm going to direct this question to Ms. Wilson, and this actually is also going to be a question for you, Mr. Harrell. Seattle hasn't seen the growth it expected in payroll tax revenue, and construction has slowed as business move out of Seattle and employees also go with them. Seattle now has actually the highest office vacancy rate in the entire country. So why do you think businesses are leaving, and what would you do, if anything, to change the trend? Ms. Wilson, take that question first.
Yeah, so I am very proud of the role that I played in 2020 in designing and passing the Jumpstart Payroll Expense Tax, which is our city's landmark tax on wealthy corporations, raising almost $400 million a year for affordable housing, many other things. It's allowed our current mayor to balance the budget for the last 4 years. And, you know, our economy as a whole is in a little bit of a downturn, which I think accounts for the lower than projected revenues from the tax. But I want to point out also that it has raised more every single year than the last year. So this is not a declining revenue source. There are some indications that Amazon and some other large employers may be moving a few high-paid jobs across the water, but I do not think that that is a significant factor in the revenue versus projections from everything that I have seen and heard. You know, I think that we need to do a lot more to revitalize downtown, to bring more businesses downtown, to make this a good environment that businesses want to work in. But I think that the Jumpstart tax is not a problem and in fact is making our community stronger.
So Mayor Harrell, just to follow up there, because she is taking somewhat of a credit for that Jumpstart tax, do you believe that though is causing some businesses to actually leave? And is it going to be a problem moving forward?
Absolutely, we should worry about businesses leaving. We know that the tech sector accounts for approximately 40% of our jobs. We know that they've recently laid off over 46,000 people. That the mayor must always consider job loss in making fiscal decisions. When we proposed the B&O tax, where 90% of the businesses actually get a tax break, and you look at the other programs that we have in our Office of Economic Development supporting small businesses, such as the Liberty Project, we have to concern ourselves with the job loss. And my opponent should not take credit for the payroll expense tax. That was done councilmanically with a supporting mayor. So when you're on the sidelines, you have to make that's okay to root for something, but these are really tough fiscal decisions that you have to make. The mayor will have to make executive decisions on police budgets or transportation budgets. And so you really have to know dollars and cents and have to be pretty astute on these issues. At the end of the line, they have to make these executive decisions.
Mr. Harrell, I have a follow-up question for you. You've supported a rewrite of the city's B&O tax, raising rates on companies that are bringing in more than $2 million in revenue, and sent that to the voters this fall. I have talked to several business leaders who are concerned and say they won't expand in this city, mostly because of the constantly changing and increasing taxes. How do you respond to that? You have 30 seconds.
Well, number one is when I propose the B&O tax, just like I do every major levy that these voters have passed, a $1.55 billion transportation levy, a $970 million housing levy that you all passed, and I have another proposal on the books with an education levy when we'll allow childcare and pre-K to 4,500 slots. What we do is I talk to them all, and I make sure my executive team talks to them all. You do not see a campaign being run against the B&O tax. I let them know. I want jobs here from the janitor to the CEO, to the C-level, to the mid-manager. I also want them to put money into the arts and culture sector. As an example, they have a corporate responsibility. So what I say to them is invest in us, and we'll make sure that you have a conducive environment to grow jobs here, and they know that. Again, that's
Time's
what
up.
you...
Sorry.
Oh, sorry about that. I was finding my rhythm.
So we want to introduce our next guest speaker, and that is Rachel Horgan. Economic opportunity and affordability is the topic here. So Rachel is our first guest question is from the founder and host of the weekly Seattle podcast. Rachel, take it away.
Thank you. Seattle is now the most expensive city in the country for restaurants and for rideshare services. This question is for Mayor Harrell. Are there policies enacted during your time on the city council or as mayor that you believe are responsible for some of these affordability issues? And what, if anything, would you change in a second term?
Absolutely. We raised a very aggressive minimum wage. Absolutely. We realized that some of the people driving Uber and Uber Eats cars were not participating in the profits that they should be. So yes, it does raise the cost of living for everyone. We have to understand that. We are a wealthy city, but I demand that these Uber companies and the Amazons of the world, Amazon made $60 billion in profit last year, $30 billion the year before. Microsoft, $80 billion. So what we're trying to do is make sure that all boats rise. And so that's, when I talk about negotiating, I believe I want my mom and dad to be able to live here. So they have to pour money back into our community. But we have to acknowledge the fact that I was negotiating the minimum wage 10 years ago. I noticed my colleague in her background check didn't mention her last job, which is working for an attorney named Helga Kauer. She had omitted that. That was her last job. That attorney, a solar practitioner, went to jail for stealing from a machinist. I bring that up to say that experience matters in this job. And we want these businesses to be here because they employ people.
Thank you. This one is for Katie Wilson. You've suggested several new progressive taxes that you'd like to see imposed under your administration. How would you prevent these new taxes from contributing to widespread affordable issues in the city?
Yeah, well, the idea with progressive taxes, we have a very regressive tax system in our state, right? Washington State, the second most regressive in the country, in fact. So what that means is that people in those lowest income brackets are paying far more of their income in state and local taxes than people in the highest income brackets. So the idea behind progressive taxes is to ask those at the top to contribute more. And that's especially appropriate in this moment where the wealthiest are actually getting a big tax break from the Trump administration. So one of the progressive taxes that I support is a local capital gains tax that would basically be layering a little bit on top of our statewide capital gains tax. And I think that that is both a very progressive tax and one that is unlikely to have any significant unintended or negative consequences. Another one that I support exploring is a digital ad tax, which would get at the fact that we have social media companies that are profiting all day, every day off of our attention, often with very bad impacts. That's one that needs a little bit more development. Yeah.
Thank you both.
Rachel, thank you. And I would like to follow up on a little bit more on what Rachel was saying. She mentioned progressive taxes, and that's something that you have talked about before. Just on the record, do you support the B&O tax that Mayor Harrell is sending to the voters?
I do support the B&O tax that was developed by Councilmember Alexis Mercedes Rink, yes.
And also, I would like to follow back up on that capital gains I mentioned just a second ago. Capital gains, we have that in the state. We know that because it was a state mandate. Are you saying that you're going to increase in the city of Seattle? And also, you had mentioned capital gains on intangible items, things that have not sold yet, things that people have not profited yet from. So how would you implement something that complicated?
So the capital gains tax is basically just layering a little bit on top of the statewide capital gains tax that we already have. So that would be a city capital gains tax. So the rate would just be slightly higher in the city of Seattle than is in the state as a whole. I think the other thing that you're referring to is a wealth tax, and that's something that has been looked at the state level. And I, to my knowledge, have nowhere suggested that we would be doing a city version of that, but rather that that is a statewide tax that I would support.
Okay. A business owner in Seattle told me recently that she hired a receptionist who's turned out to be a fantastic and very promising employee. She wanted to promote her, but the young woman asked that she not be paid more because the raise would force her to move out of her affordable apartment, and she would not be able to afford to live in the city anymore. So, Mr. Harrell, I'll direct this first question to you, but I will come to you as well, Ms. Wilson. How would you address what's been called the missing middle for housing? And you have 60 seconds.
Sure. So I have to be very clear to put it in context. Under our administration, over my tenure, we've had $642 million of a deficit. It's been a tough hand. But even with that tough hand, my current budget has $350 million to address that. We put in about $11.5 million for rental assistance and other supports so people don't become homeless. In the housing levy that I proposed and you passed, we are keeping 9,000 people in their homes so that they don't become homeless, and we're building another 3,100 units. So that missing level piece is like what we're doing right now in a $20 million investment near Northgate, the Northgate Commons, 1,400 units of affordable housing. Fort Lawton, 500 units. The Cortera project, 800 units, 200 of which are going to be income restricted. So we realize that there is the working poor, if you will. That is a segment that we're hitting hard. Again, we want artists and baristas and healthcare workers to live here in Seattle, and our policies reflect that.
Thank you. And Ms. Wilson, much of your campaign has centered around affordable housing. What would you do for those who don't necessarily qualify for that and still cannot afford to live in our city?
Yeah, and I mean, most of the housing that my opponent just talked about is the kind of housing that you would no longer be able to live in if you got that bump in your paycheck. So this is one reason why I'm a strong supporter of social housing, which our current mayor opposed. And voters have twice told us overwhelmingly that they want the city to develop permanently affordable, publicly owned, mixed income housing. So this goes up to 120% of area median income, which is a very large spread. So that means that no one's paying more than 30% of their income in rent. But if you get that raise, that's fine, right? You can still live in that building. So that's one of the real wonderful things about that model. The other thing I'll say is that in order to accommodate the growth of our region, part of the reason housing costs are so high is because our housing stock has not kept pace with the growing population. And so our land use and zoning laws really need to allow more housing to be built in great neighborhoods around the city, including that middle housing that's going to be more affordable for those middle income households. And the comprehensive plan that our mayor proposed does not go nearly far enough in allowing the building of that housing.
Mayor, would you like to respond?
I'd love to. First of all, there seems to be an issue of transparency here. She said, I oppose Social Housing Corporation. You will not find one statement, one speech, one document that says I opposed Social Housing Corporation. I proposed another way to pay for it. It was simple as that. And that's why I brought up the veracity part about her removing Helga Kauer, who she was assistant to, who went to jail as a lawyer and got disbarred because she omitted that from her background. I'm a lot of things, but a liar I'm not. And so when I say we're targeting working poor, when we specifically sit around with our housing director and my housing cabinet, I created for the first time a sub-housing cabinet, we are attacking that demographic, and our investments reflect that.
Ms. Wilson, you can respond.
Yeah, this is really weird. I know that my opponent's campaign has spent a lot of money digging into my background, but it's very strange to be held responsible for the actions of a lawyer who I worked for, who got in trouble after I worked for her.
Thank you. Ms. Wilson, you've promised a plan that would create 4,000 new units of emergency housing in just 4 years. That is a very difficult task, especially as previous affordable housing developers are leaving the city because it is such an expensive environment to do business. Many are finding this very hard to do. Can you be specific about why your plan will work?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very important that we go at this as hard as we can. And one of the big disappointments about the last 4 years for me has been that our current mayor came into office promising to build 2,000 units of emergency housing and shelter in his first year and did not deliver. And we actually have lost shelter capacity every single year he's been in office. We have thousands more people sleeping unsheltered than we did. So we need to do this. And this is going to be a mixture, right? This is going to be a mix of tiny house villages and micro-modular shelters, which are honestly the kind of shelter that often unsheltered homeless people are eager to move into, right? The other thing that I am exploring, and this is an idea that needs to be developed alongside folks in the affordable housing sector, but we have high levels of vacancy in that sector for a number of reasons, including that we've been emphasizing the production of new units without actually paying attention to who those units are for. So we have vacancies across the sector. If we can buy down the rent in those units so that folks coming out of homelessness can live in them, that's a much more efficient way to use our existing affordable housing stock and a very cost-effective way to get people inside.
I'd like to ask you a follow-up, Katie, on that, Ms. Wilson, on that. How are you going to pay for that?
So this is going to be a mixture of repurposing existing revenue, and then we will, over the 4 years, have to seek some new revenue. So part of this is going to be looking at the housing levy, and again, in collaboration with folks in the affordable housing sector, rebalancing a little bit the dollars in that levy that are going to new capital projects versus operations, because right now the operations is very low, and that's part of why we run into this problem where providers are selling off buildings because they can't actually afford to operate them. So we're going to need to rebalance that, and that's part of how we're going to be able to buy down rent in some of these units. We're also going to need to use parts of Jumpstart, and basically, I mean, I think the other thing is just that we need to look at everything that we're spending money on in the city, and we can't be afraid if there are programs that maybe were well-intentioned when they were first designed but are no longer filling that purpose or being effective. Maybe that's not the highest priority right now. So it's going to involve some repurposing, and then also we are going to need to seek new revenue. I also think that looking at working with the state legislature legislature to revive the encampment resolution program, which was very successful on resolving encampments near state highways, right? I think we can seek some funding from the state to help out with this as well.
Quick follow-up to that, since you mentioned that, maybe there needs to be some cuts. What are some specific cuts that you would make if you had to do them today?
Yeah, I mean, I think that needs to be looked at. I mean, if I were to call out something specific, I'd say that the mayor's political consultants probably gotten enough city money for a while.
Mayor Harrell, would you like to respond to that?
Well, I've heard her talk about this 4,000 units. There's no money for her to do that. My opponent cannot deliver on that. She's been talking about this, my opponent has, for some time, and I have asked the question many times, because we did build 2,000 units. We have another 1,000 on the way. That is the fact of the matter. And by the way, the research that I paid these people for, it's just online. My opponent applied for the rental commission, for the Transit Advisory Board. I'm just trying to make sure that in this election, you see the choices clear. So her housing plan, my opponent has no housing background. That's just a fact. I've been working on these issues for 30 years. As an attorney, I represent many of these housing corporations. We have a solid plan, and we have the money for it. That's why we're so aggressive on the housing levy. That's why we have $350 million in the budget right now, in a tight budget for affordable housing. And a best practice is sustainable, permanent supportive housing for those people that are unsheltered, that need help, not sticking them in a tent or a tiny home or a former shelter. We are playing the long game to save lives and to bring people in sheltered. And that's exactly what we're doing. That's why I invest so much in the Regional Homeless Authority.
You have 30 seconds to respond to what he said if you needed it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll say, first of all, that the plan that I outlined actually does involve putting people in permanent housing, because we're taking advantage of the fact that there are widespread vacancies in the affordable housing sector. And I'll also just say, look around you, right? Seattle is a national outlier in our rates of unsheltered homelessness. We have to do better. And I encourage everyone to read the recent Axios article, which breaks down the numbers and shows how the mayor is taking credit for units that were started before he came into office and basically fudging the numbers to claim that he's actually created those 2,000 units in the course of his term.
Well, since you're bringing that up, I just wanted to get more clarification on that, Mayor Harrell. So Axios did report that your office counted replacements, relocations, and projects already in progress in order to report those 2,000 units that year, while a more accurate number would be around 1,300. What do you say to voters who are maybe skeptical that you'll deliver what you're promising now, because you did promise that back in 2021?
What Axios fails to understand is that during COVID, there were one-time funds to shelter people. We're using hotels, we're using vouchers, we're doing everything possible. We didn't want anyone dying in that situation. These are one-time funds in a very tough situation. We have to also remember that homelessness in this country has gone up 18%. We have nearly 1 million people in this country. Homelessness in the state has gone up. Homelessness in the county has gone up. And 70% of the people that we are treating in Seattle that are homeless did not become unhoused within the city of Seattle. And that's important to know, because when I said 2 years ago, 2,204 people accepted shelter referrals, and the next year about the same amount. We are doing everything humanly possible, and we've been working on these issues for 30 years. Again, my opponent has no background in this, in housing anyone at all, and I will tell you, I will take the blame for our failures. We will do better, but you have to put it in the context of what's happening in this country and what's happening in the state and the county and this city, and this is tough work. And that's why we laid the foundation to house everyone, and it can be solved with a regional approach.
It is time to go to our next speaker, guest speaker Maria Chavez Wilcox, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the YWCA of Seattle, King, and Snohomish counties. And she has a question for the candidates.
So the first question is for Mayor Harrell. What specific policies or investments would you prioritize to balance housing development with equity, ensuring that women, families, immigrants, and communities of color are not in the greatest number becoming the ones that are being unhoused?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So to level set the answer, so I was the author of the race and social justice legislation. And what that it required every city policy to look at it through the lens of an affected person. So in all of our housing policies, we bring everyone to the table, whether they're homeless, whether they're women, whether they're LGBTQ+, whatever that demographic is. I recently announced an $80 million anti-gentrification reparations fund for African Americans because we looked at the redlining policies. So all of our policies are designed to be inclusive. And we should be proud of that as a city. So we've tried to do in all of our housing policies to make sure that those most effective are at the table. I recently announced a $170 million investment because our Housing First policy that I was supportive of when I was on the council made sure we just get people inside. But there's fentanyl and criminal issues within. So working with the housing development developers, we develop policies with them to stabilize their housing. And that's our recent $170 million investment.
Thank you. The next question is for candidate Wilson. You have been extremely critical of the current administration's housing policies. So what specific policies or investment would you prioritize, and what makes you think that they're going to be any more effective than the ones that Mayor Harrell has already implemented?
Sure, thank you for the question. I'll give a few different quick answers. So number one, again, social housing. And I think that the city can do a lot more to be a strong and active partner with the new social housing developer to make sure that it gets rolling and is able to expand as quickly as possible. So that includes things like partnering on identifying appropriate sites for social housing, buildings for acquisition, and potentially even using our financing capacity, our bonding capacity to help get money up front. Also, I would say that in terms of our land use and zoning laws, I think that there were some real missed opportunities in the comprehensive plan that just passed, but there are going to be opportunities coming up next year. So for example, the potential addition of more neighborhood centers that will allow the building of more multifamily housing across the city that can help to moderate rents and just create more space for families, for middle income households. I also support strengthening the city's economic displacement relocation assistance law, which currently provides for if your rent is raised 10% or more and you have to move out, your landlord is supposed to contribute 3 times your monthly rent as relocation assistance. If we bump that threshold down to 5%, that will both provide some relocation assistance for folks who are displaced by large rent increases, and it will also just disincentivize those large rent increases in the first place.
Mayor Harrell would like to give you 30 seconds to respond.
We have to acknowledge the fact that Seattle is one of the fastest growing cities in the country, actually 4th. The comp plan that we developed, looking at the 84 square miles of the city, is a very smart comp plan, but it's very aggressive. In order to achieve affordable housing, we had to be aggressive. So what we did is we proposed 330,000 units around transit-oriented development, certain neighborhood centers, and we were very thoughtful. We also submitted a supplemental EIS to see even where we can do even more. Making sure that, again, and if you want to know why we amended the tree ordinance after 14 years, which we didn't have to, is because we wanted to preserve trees as well. You'll notice my opponent never says what the number would be. I say 330,000. And I asked my opponent in another forum, is that 350? Is that 400? 450,000? Just like on her staffing on police, that there's on the 4,000 units, there's no numbers involved. And so I think an executive just has to be forthright and say, this is the Seattle, this is the vision that I'm trying to create, and you're just not seeing that. So mine is very clear, a comp plan with 330,000 units.
Ms. Wilson.
Yeah, I just wanted to give one more specific example from the comp plan of where I think we need to go further. So right now, the new multifamily construction that is allowed is generally concentrated right along busy, noisy arterials, which are often not safe for pedestrians, as well as just not pleasant to live along. And so I believe that the definition of near transit in our kind of transit-oriented development part of that plan needs to be expanded so that within that 5-minute walk shed of frequent transit lines, we are able to build more of that multifamily housing. And that will help to moderate rents. The current comp plan puts us on track for increasing rent increases into the future, which as a renter myself is something that definitely concerns me.
Wanted to move on to public safety. Emily?
Yeah, thank you. FBI statistics have showed that in 2024, Seattle had the 4th highest overall crime rate compared to other large cities. The crime numbers this year overall seem to be on a better path than last year. But Mr. Harrell, it's no secret that repeat offenders are driving much of this crime. Is the city too lax on repeat offenders?
That's an interesting question. I don't know how to answer that question too lax. I don't know how you gauge that. I know it's necessary to catch criminals in the act of doing bad things. And I have all the faith in my police department, who is a best practice in terms of using force. I need 1,500 officers. I need constitutional arrests. I need people that are killing themselves with drugs to get help, get treatment. So I'm not going to give an opinion on the attitude of my officers. I look at them in the eye and I tell them, this is my vision. George Floyd was murdered, purely and simply. And I need you to recruit culturally competent officers. And we created the care department, which is an unarmed response, the largest city in the country to do this. So whether they're lax or not, for me, in all due respect, is just not the question. The question is, are they effective? And they are very effective. I just need to get my numbers up because the defund movement demoralized the police department. I was down 300 when you started, but the good news is we're getting 10 applications a day. So to me, the question is, are they effective? And they're very effective when given the resources.
Mayor Harrell, I want to go back to that repeat offender question. If somebody has offended 6, 7, 8 times, even if it's a minor offense, but they continue to fail to turn their life around, at what point do you balance public safety to giving this person, some accountability? What is that balance?
So let me make something very clear. I was the one that sponsored the ban the box legislation when everyone opposed it because the criminal system has had a disparate impact on Black and brown communities. Let me lead with that. So when this person is committing 6 or 7 crimes, I don't know his or her story. Maybe they were abused as a child. Maybe they're hungry. So my remedy is to find their life story to see how we could help first. I have no desire to put them in jail, but I need to protect you, and that's the calibration that we have. I put police officers on the stand. I've cross-examined them. So whether they commit 7 or 8 crimes to me is not the issue. The issue is, why are they committing these crimes? And so we have a health-based strategy. We authorized our fire department, for example, to be the first fire department in the country to administer buprenorphine. I want these people treated. So for me, it's not 7 or 8. It's how do I stop, how do I go upstream to find out what's in their life? But at the end of the day, I also have to protect you, and that's the calibration that we've done. And we are best practice in this country in doing it.
Ms. Wilson, I would like to have you answer that question.
Yeah, thank you. I'd love to answer this question. So one specific strategy that I think we need to do much more of to be effective on this problem of repeat offenders is effective diversion programs. So we have here in Seattle law enforcement assisted diversion, which is a nationally recognized program where if someone is arrested, they have the opportunity, instead of going through that booking and jail process, to be diverted into a path with case management, if they're homeless, shelter, housing, with services to help them be successful there. Unfortunately, our current mayor in previous budgets in his term has severely cut funding for the LEAD program, but this is exactly the kind of program that we need in order to address the problem of repeat offenders, especially for low-level crimes, without just giving people long jail sentences, which frankly doesn't work either.
Follow up to that. You talk about possibly alternative sentencing as a progressive candidate. One of the things under Mayor Harrell's administration, specifically Ann Davison, the city attorney's office, she got rid of community court, which is something that is an alternative to jail time. But one of the reasons why she got rid of it was because there was a backlog, as well as the fact that data showed that it was not helping with repeat offenders. It just was not effective. If you were the mayor, would you bring that program back, or would you keep it the way it is now?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'm actually not sure about whether the answer is yes or no. So I know that City Attorney candidate Erica Evans is thinking about this as well, and so if elected, I will be working closely with our next City Attorney to decide whether bringing community court back is the right course and perhaps fixing some of those problems surrounding it, or whether it's better to continue on the course that we're on now.
So, Ms. Wilson, also, you have spoken again about alternatives to policing in the past to help with public safety. Under Mayor Harrell, there's already a program that somewhat does that. The care team includes social workers that go out with first responders to more than, so far, 3,000 calls since late 2023. Many of those calls involve the homeless population. So if you were the mayor, would you support the current goal to double the care team?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we need to double it, and we need to go further than that, right? There are a few other cities around the country that have gone much further than Seattle in expanding alternative response, and that's partly about the number of people on that team. It's also about the range of calls that they're able to respond to, right? We still have only two kinds of calls here in Seattle that our care team is allowed to respond to. In a couple other cities, there's a much wider range of calls. And the other issue is whether they are allowed to respond independently without police there as well, because as long as they always have to have police there, then we're not actually freeing up police time to deal with more serious crime or investigate more serious crime. So I definitely support a expansion of the care department. I support making it possible for them to respond independently when appropriate. And I also, there are a number of other kind of non-police outreach teams or responder teams that are operated by nonprofits that are doing really great work, but there needs to be some more kind of leadership from the city in bringing those all under the umbrella of the care team and making sure that there's clarity on who's the right responder in a given situation, because when you have a number of small teams, there can be kind of confusion and inefficiency of resources.
Also, 30 seconds for this question. Mayor Harrell has brought up somewhat that in the past you have advocated for defunding of the police. Do you still support defunding the police?
I think I've been very clear in this campaign that I support a police department that is adequately staffed, that is responsive, and that is accountable to the communities that it serves. And I know that my opponent desperately wishes that he was running against someone who wants to defund the police, but the fact is he's not.
Mayor Harrell, would you like to respond?
First of all, I'm not desperate on anything. Let's just get that straight. Let me clarify. I'm desperate for the truth. And I'm desperate for a North Star. When my opponent just a few years ago said significantly cutting the police budget means significantly fewer officers. Let's stick with the current movement demand of cutting the SPD budget by half. And when my opponent says stuff like adequately staffing as opposed to what, inadequately staffing, my fear is that my opponent doesn't know how to lead a police department. My opponent doesn't know how to lead a fire department or a care department. A lot of what my opponent is describing, the lead, the We Deliver Care, the community-based organizations, I've been working with these organizations for years. They know me by a first name. And so what we have here is a failure to demonstrate experience or commitment to a North Star, which is public safety. And that's why I'm not desperate to run against a defund. I just don't know how any executive could change their tune so quickly because it's politically expedient. That's what I don't like.
Ms. Wilson, would you like to respond? 30 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say again, in 2020, after the murder of George Floyd, we had a very contentious public conversation around what true community safety means. And I don't want to throw that movement totally under the bus, although I have learned a lot since then and definitely changed my opinions a lot since then. But I will also say that that movement accomplished a great deal. Without that movement, we would not have the care team. Without that movement, we would not have the conversation that we are having now about roles that police do not need to be performing, not just responding to crisis calls, but taking down reports of property crimes or responding to non-injury traffic accidents. That movement made progress. Progress happens in fits and starts. We go forward, we go backward, we go forward, we go backward, and we learn. And I have learned, and I'm proud that I have learned.
Mayor Harrell, this question is for you. The Chinatown International District is back in the news recently over violence. As of late September, they've had 210 cases of violent crime and 441 incidents of property crimes so far this year, which is significantly higher than many other neighborhoods in Seattle. And when it comes to rapes specifically, those cases have gone up more than 100% already compared to last year. Under your watch, SPD has emphasized certain things like emphasized patrols and even having SWAT team members out there at times. But it doesn't appear to have lasting impacts in that area. What more needs to be done?
Yeah, to put it in context, that area is where my grandparents and my parents and my aunts and uncles lived and worked. Very near and dear to me. I was just born about a mile and a half from that area. We clean it up. We try to treat people, and bad things keep occurring. We did arrest 14 of the most prolific drug dealers there. We seized $3 million worth of drugs, enough to kill everyone in Seattle twice, but we still keep having reoccurring problems. The issue is we don't have anywhere to take them to treat them. they're killing themselves and they're committing crimes to support their habits. The good news is, through the Crisis Care Center, we'll have many of them coming online. The good news is we just opened the Orca Center and the Star Center to get them treatment. The good news is we just have ambassadors now working with even private donations and city funding to walk those areas. The good news is we're getting 10 officers a day applying to a police department, and we'll be able to get our officers out there to befriend, not necessarily to arrest, but to arrest the drug traffickers and the sex traffickers, but we'll get them out of the cars to be able to save this community. It's very personal for me, and we have sustainable progress in everything that we're doing, but I'm not satisfied with that.
30-second follow-up to that. You have proposed $40 million in spending in your 2026 budget for SPD. Where would that money, where would you like to see that go specifically when it comes to SPD?
Sure. So number one, a lot of that will go to treatment. Some of our treatment health options for people that are experiencing problems, number one. We have under Chief Sean Barnes what we call a Seattle-centric police plan. And instead of having a siloed approach where it's like SDOT or the police department or the fire department, we're looking at places creating interdepartmental teams to make sure that people have ownership of the certain areas. And that takes staffing, and that takes strategy, and that takes work. You see it through what we call the downtown activation team. You see it through our unified care approach, that we're treating people the right way, looking at a holistic approach. That's what we're doing. So that's where that money is designed to do, place-based strategies.
Ms. Wilson, I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about how you would approach the statistics that Hana has mentioned about the Seattle International District.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is such a concern, and as I've been talking with folks around the city over the course of this campaign, both in the Chinatown International District, also downtown, also Capitol Hill, also Mount Baker, like many neighborhoods, it's clear that public safety is very much at the top of many people's minds right now. A few things that I've been concerned about looking at Mayor Harrell's leadership of the police department. One is that compared to Boston, we're actually spending more than 2 times per officer in our overall police budget. And that's not officer pay. The pay is comparable. So there's a real question about how effectively we are using our police dollars right now. And we have had excess violent crime compared to national trends over the last 4 years. There was an audit last year that showed that the city is not following best practices regarding gun violence, either preventing it or responding to it. And we really haven't been doing the community policing that I think the mayor was alluding to, where as much as possible, we're hiring officers from within the communities they're going to serve. And they're out there on the street, building relationships with business owners, with other institutions, with residents, and taking that problem-solving approach to issues in the neighborhood. Now, I think there are some good things that have started over the last few years. I think that, downtown, we have the We Deliver Care team and some pilots that have been pretty successful in terms of, outreach, but they really need a more consistent presence of police officers. They can't do it alone. And the police presence has been very inconsistent, both downtown, in the CID, and other neighborhoods. So there's a lot of things that I think we need to do better on.
Are you saying that we need more officers?
Yeah, I mean, we do need to keep hiring officers. And the way that I look at this, and I know that my opponent talks about a certain number of officers per population or something like that, but it's really about the results that we see on the ground, right? So when you need an officer to come, when you're in an unsafe situation, you're the victim of a crime, an officer needs to arrive in a timely manner. That's police response times, and they're still far higher than they should be. And when there's a situation that does not require an armed response, you need to be able to get a different kind of person to come to address that situation. So it's focusing on those on-the-ground results, and we do need to keep hiring officers until we get there, but also we need to focus more on civilianizing those roles that do not require a sworn officer.
Mayor Harrell, I'd like you to respond because she said a couple of things there about how you are, governing SPD.
Sure. It should be apparent that my opponent will never talk about how many officers that my opponent needs on the police department. There's data out there. There's criminology theory out there. I've said 1.9 per thousand people. That gets us up to 1,500. The audits that my opponent references these audits are the work that we need to do to get better. I served as a public safety chair for 4 years on the city council. I served as vice chair for another 4 years. So I've tried to get well versed in this area of public safety. We welcome the audits so we can get better. The fact of the matter is our police department right now are getting 5 guns off this street a day. Thousands of guns per year. The fact of the matter is we have too many guns in the wrong hands in the city and in this country. So my opponent, in all due respect, doesn't have a clue as to how to run a police department. I mean, in all due respect, experience matters in a situation like this, because I'm the one in the homes of people that die and talk to the mom and to the dad. I'm the one that talked to Mara Murphy's, Payne's father when he was killed at Garfield. So my support for the police officers is because I want to protect everyone. And the data would suggest we're trending. That's why we're able to terminate the consent decree that we were under for 13 years, because we're using force the right way.
30-second quick follow-up, please.
I mean, I'll just say that over the last few weeks, I've been talking with a number of mothers, Seattle mothers, who've been impacted by the disease of gun violence, who've lost children. And they do not feel seen, and they do not feel heard at City Hall.
Our last guest speaker is Lynn Varner. She is the CEO at Washington STEM. Lynn?
Thank you. This question is for Mayor Harrell and candidate Wilson. The mayor's office and the city do not directly influence education policy or funding. And neither candidate has talked much about education. But mayors do back programs and initiatives that impact learners. For example, the Seattle Promise, which makes 2 years of college available for all Seattle high school graduates. Well, it's on the ballot for renewal in November. Do you support this program and its growth? And what plan do you have to ensure Seattle students are supported as they move from high school to college and career? Candidate Wilson, you could go first.
Yeah, I definitely support this. And you know, I think that we can do a lot more regarding apprenticeship programs and mentorship for folks in the high school age. Sorry, are you talking about, can you repeat the question? You're talking about specifically moving into college?
Yes, from high school to college and career. That transition point is really important.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that mentorship and apprenticeship programs are really important, and I know we have some really good ones, often in partnership with our labor unions, but I think we need to build on that. And I also think that it would be great to expand that 2-year promise to 4 years. And I think we also should look at transit benefits, right? So we have free transit for youth across Washington state, and it would be great to expand that so that as long as people are in that program, they also have that free Orca card benefit that can help them to travel around the city.
Mayor Harrell?
Sure. So for me, education saved my life. I was the first in my family to graduate. And this levy that we negotiated, talking to education advocates, everyone around here that cared about the future of these kids, we got aggressive at $1.3 billion. I was very proud that the Seattle Times endorsed this, because this is an aggressive levy. 4,500 spots of childcare and pre-K, brain development between 0 and 4. A lot of these people on that earlier question that are committing crimes, we don't know what experiences they had when they were 0 to 4. That's why I brought that up. The data is very clear. If you invest in these children early, they can become outstanding people. Now they go to college and we do after school. They can be in the maritime industry, the port industry. They could get internships and apprenticeships, or they can go into college and be an artist or even a code developer. It doesn't make any difference. We're creating the pathway 2 full years. And I'll tell you why I started that program. I birthed that program because our daughter was getting ready to go to college and she was on a basketball scholarship. But all of her friends that had 2.6, 2.7 GPAs, they didn't have a path. They weren't accepted at these schools. And I went back and we only put about $750,000 in the budget, and I got the votes. And the spigot was open, and now look at what we're doing. Every kid in the public schools. For black and brown people, for women that are overlooked in the workplace, for anyone that has been othered, this is a pathway for you. And that's why we got aggressive, and yes, I support it wholeheartedly.
Would you support expanding it to 4 years, as your opponent said?
Again, in all due respect, you can't do that in a $1.3 billion renewal. But if we could do 4 years, yes, absolutely. But my opponent wouldn't be able to deliver that. We've crunched those numbers. We're doing it for 2 years. Remember, it only started for 1 year with 3 schools. It started with 1 year for 3 schools, And now we're going to get it for 2 years. So yes, we'd love to do it for 4 years.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. It's now time for closing statements, and because Ms. Wilson went first, Mayor Harrell, it is your turn to do closing statements first this time around.
Well, thank you all for your patience, by the way. This has been a very lively debate. I think the choice should be clear. On the one hand, you have a proven leader with experience. Are we perfect? Of course not. We had to right the ship. We were all wearing masks when I took office. Again, I had a $642 million deficit. But look at the progress we've made. We have set this city up to achieve what we can dream, what we hope to dream about. I love that last question about our kids. At the end of the day, we will spend $1 billion for affordable housing. Our comp plan is real. We will protect trees. Our public safety department, I'm getting 10 applications a day, and they will be able to get out the car and befriend folks. And the fentanyl treatment that we're doing, the health investments we're making, this is real. I will tell you with Trump, that didn't come up. Trump will walk over inexperience. Walk over inexperience. This is personal for me. It was an executive order that put my mother in a concentration camp. I'm well versed in the 10th Amendment and federal overreach. In troubled and threatening times, experience matters. And I humbly ask for you to give me a second term because we have the ship right where we want. We have the tenacity, the toughness to fight Trump. And you see me doing it every single day with a great team.
That's time.
Okay. I'm just going to say one thing about Trump, which is that I was very concerned by the CCTV surveillance legislation that the mayor proposed and the council passed that was opposed by immigrants' rights groups and civil liberties groups, specifically because of the risk that it poses of the federal government having access to that personal information and data. Okay, closing statement. It's great to be here. Thank you all for being here. This is democracy in action. I have not gone through my career aspiring to hold elected office. I am an outsider, but I am an outsider who has an insider's knowledge of City Hall. I have been at the table when legislation is hashed out, when programs are designed, and when policies are implemented. At its core, the job of mayor is about leadership, and that means assembling a team of people who have the highest competence and integrity, keeping them oriented around a common vision and motivated, and that is exactly what I have spent my career doing. I am proud in this race to have the endorsement of Protect 17, the largest union of city workers who are asking for a new boss. And I'm proud to have the endorsement of MLK Labor, our King County Labor Council, of the King County Democrats, and the sole endorsement of every single Democrat Party organization in the city. And most important, the endorsement of the 51% of primary voters who voted for me in an 8-way primary this August. Politics, I believe, is about relationships. It's about collaboration. And I also believe that we don't need to agree on everything in order to work together. I would be honored to have your support. Thank you.
Okay, we've come to the end of our evening. Thank you so much for watching, everybody, and please make sure you vote, that's for sure. You can register online or by mail until October 27th. Election Day is November 4th. Mark it on your calendar. I'd like to thank my co-moderator, Emily Parkhurst with Formidable Media, and all of you in the audience. You've been so great, silent this whole time. And let's thank our candidates now, Bruce Harrell and Katie Wilson.